Hello everybody, welcome. This is the 9th YouTube session of the Pixel Project's 6th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. My name is Anusha Kandasivam. I'm your moderator for this session. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 17 award-winning and best-selling women writers to raise awareness about violence against women, to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking, and to help us reveal the first mystery celebrity male role model portrait in our Celebrity Male Role Model Pixel Reveal campaign. Now, I'll be telling you a little more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser a little later. We have lots and lots of exclusive author goodies, but meanwhile, if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project and the work we do, go to www.thepixelproject.net. Okay, so we have a very special guest for today's live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session, the award-winning fantasy author, Kat Howard. Hello, Kat.
Hi, it's nice to see everybody.
So Kat writes novels, short stories, comics, usually in the realm of dark fantasy. Her most recent novel is An Unkindness of Magicians, and it won an Alex Award. She teaches the MFA program at Western Colorado University and lives in New Hampshire. And that was the book. So Kat has very generously donated a couple of exclusive treats to the stash of author goodies we have set up on our Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page as perks for donors. So let me tell you what they are. Treat number 1 is the Kat Howard Starter Book Bundle, which is a signed and personalized hardcover set of 4 of her books for 1 donor in the US. So these are An Unkindness of Magicians. That's it. That's a really cool cover, though. And Roses and Rot. Ta-da! A Cathedral of Myth and Bone. Ooh. And The End of a Sentence, which is co-authored with Maria Davana Hidley. Oh, that's really cool. So all of those hardcover books, signed and personalized by Kat, available to 1 US donor. So treat number 2 is pretty cool as well. It's a Drabble by Kat for 1 US donor. So Kat has very kindly offered to write an exclusive 100-word story for 1 fabulous donor. So the story will be based on 1 word of the donor's choice. And Kat will send you a typed hard copy, which will be signed, and also email you a soft copy of the story. So
and and a handwritten version.
And a handwritten version as well. So that's 3. That's amazing. That's pretty cool. So 100-word story just for you, based on a word that you pick, and you get a typed up hard copy, a handwritten hard copy, and a soft copy of the story. So if you're a Kat Howard fan, or indeed a fan of fantasy that centers on powerful women, you better hurry up and donate and get it, because Kat has only 1 of each of these treats available. So once it's gone forever. And let me tell you guys, we've raised $5,495 so far, and this is past our initial $5,000 goal, which is great. So we are now aiming to reach a $10,000 stretch goal to make up for last year's funding shortfall. So please do give generously. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. Now, I'll be telling you how you can get your hands on all this swag a bit later in the session, how you can donate. Stay tuned. Before we go on to the reading and the questions with Kat, let me tell you guys that you, the audience, can participate. You can ask questions. Just make sure you're logged onto your YouTube account. And you can type your questions up in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. And our chat box producers, Denisha, today will help relay the questions to us, and Kat will answer them. Okay, so on to you, Kat, for your reading, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm going to read a bit from my most recent novel, An Unkindness of Magicians. I'm going to read the introduction of the main character. It's split into 2 parts, so I'm going to read the opening and closing scene of the first chapter. The young woman cut through the crowded New York sidewalk like a knife. Tall in her red-soled stilettos, black clothing that clung to her like smoke, red-tipped black hair sharp and angular around her face. She looked like the kind of woman people would stop for, stare at, notice. None of them did. Stalking down Wall Street, the spire of Trinity Church rising before her, she slid among the suits and tourists like a secret, drawing no eyes, no shouted "Hey, babies," not even the casual jar of a shoulder bumped in a crowd. She could have been a ghost, a shadow. The sun stark, the sky a harsh blue, cloudless and broken only by the glare of reflections. Late summer heat stewed salt sweat and heavy cologne together, mingling them with the sizzle rising from sidewalk food carts. The day bright, almost ordinary. The woman paused at a corner. Her slate gray eyes flicked up toward some unmarked window in one of the buildings scraping the sky, as if to be sure someone was watching. Her lips, red as blood, quirked up at the corners, and Sydney stepped off the curb and into traffic. Neither the cars nor their drivers seemed aware of her presence. Sydney walked to the center of the intersection and raised her arms like a conductor about to begin a symphony. She stood, unmoving, for one breath, 2, 3. If there had been eyes somewhere above that rushing city that were able to watch, they would have seen her lips moving. And then, the cars around her, as one, lifted gracefully into the air. Sydney held them there, rust-stained taxis and sleek black sedans with tinted windows, courier vans and a tour bus blaring the opening number of the latest Broadway hit. 10 feet above the ground, floating through the intersection like some bizarre migration of birds. A smile stretched, bright and wild, across her face. If the people in the cars could have seen it, they might have called it exhilaration. They might have called it joy. The people in the cars couldn't see her. No blaring horns, no cursing drivers, no awe, no reaction from either the people in the now flying vehicles or from any of the passers-by. Simply flight, where that shouldn't have been an option. Sydney directed the cars through the intersection, through the air, with words, with small precise gestures that bent her fingers and hands into severe origami, with no obvious effort. And then, her hands paused, held like a breath. 2, 3. She lowered her arms to her sides, and as she did, the cars returned to the street as gracefully as they had left it, the flow of traffic uninterrupted. Sydney walked out of the intersection and cut back into the crowd. No heads turned. No one gave her any notice. She had gone less than half a block when the text alert vibrated through her phone. The job is yours. And then the closing. As Sydney crossed the threshold of her building, the veil of magic she had draped herself in sloughed off, and she was again visible to the world around her. "Any messages, Henry?" she asked the doorman. "Not today, miss." She smiled her thanks and took the elevator up to the 7th floor. Sydney lived in a mundane building on purpose. No one from the unseen world would think to look for her there. The snobbery was as useful as it was predictable. She had set up a series of wards when she'd first moved in 6 months ago, and they'd never even been tested, much less crossed. She closed her door, locked it behind her, and stepped out of her shoes, rolling the aches from her arches. Pulled her phone from her pocket and texted her acceptance to Laurent. Done. Barefoot, Sydney walked to her kitchen island and poured a glass of dark red wine. She had set the wheels turning. Not Fortune's wheel. She had little enough patience for the trappings of the unseen world, but her own. She drank, savoring the curl of the liquid down her throat, enjoying the richness of it. Being able to indulge in pleasures, even once as small as a glass of wine when she wanted, was still something new. Something she'd worked hard enough for that she still luxuriated in the indulgence of it. Working with Laurent would be good. She'd wanted a candidate house, hoped for an outsider. Someone unestablished, less likely to have accepted all of the unseen world's dirty little secrets as gospel. Someone who might come to see things as she did, might even be an ally. She planned to drag all those dirty little secrets out of the shadows and into the light. And if necessary, the light would be cast by the flames she had lit as she burned the unseen world to the ground. She raised her glass, toasting its destruction. Tremors racked her, The wine sloshed over the rim of the glass, spilling drops as red as blood. A dull knife of pain took up residence in her wrists and shoulders, and she felt herself hollow out, as if she were caught in the grip of a fever. Sweat beaded up on her skin. This was the price for today's magic. Sydney set her glass down and breathed into the shaking, the ache, the hollowness in her bones. She centered herself in it until she was steady, the pain not gone but acknowledged. She was used to acknowledging pain. It had become, over time and trial, rather a specialty of hers. She raised her glass again, held it steady, her hand unshaking. She drank. Thank you.
Awesome. That's such a great introduction to Sydney.
Thank you.
Which brings me to my first question,
Okay.
which is your books feature plenty of fabulous female protagonists. We just saw Sydney. That's an Unkindness of Magicians. There's Imogen and Marin in Roses and Rot, and of course all the women in A Cathedral of Myth and Bone. They're all complex, they're compelling, they're all kinds of characters, they're human, they have agency. Could you tell us who or what are your inspirations for all these fabulous female characters?
None of them are really necessarily taken from a specific person. But, I look around at the women that I'm fortunate enough to know, that I'm fortunate enough to be related to, or to be friends with, or, to see in their professional aspects. And they are full, rich, compelling people with, amazing lives and many skills and, lots of talent and all of that. And so I feel like really that inspiration is all around in the women I know and the women that I see working and living in the world.
Yeah, okay, that's a pretty cool answer. So all genres have their share of female stereotypes and tropes, and you write a lot of alternative modern depictions of fairy tales, which is where most of the stereotypes and tropes actually stem from. So how do you break stereotypes to create these female characters with agency while dealing with the world around her, which includes situations involving sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
I think it's really important. I think you said, to go back to the original stories where the tropes and things like that, where the original, women can't be as good, or you can't trust them, or whatever it is, or they don't deserve to have their stories told, to go back to those original stories and just sort of reach in and pull them inside out and say, actually, yes, women do deserve to have their stories told. They are amazing, and they're not just a collection of tropes and a collection of, ideas that are all sort of silly and wrong and based in misogynism and sexism and all the rest of those things, that to look and say, no, there are deep and powerful stories here. And that's always been something that's really, really important to me, is to use my work to say that women's stories are important.
Yeah, cool. So now your female characters, there's so many different kinds of women, right? And they're generally flawed in some way, as all humans are. Some of them might be perceived by readers as unlikable. When writing a female character, do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural stereotypes to make them likable or relatable? And have you ever got any flack for not making a female character likable enough?
I think there's always that sort of, that voice in your, at least when I work, there's always a sort of a voice in the background saying, oh, you need to be careful. You want to make people like this. I think wanting to be liked, wanting people, or when you're an artist, wanting people to like your work, I think that's a pretty natural desire. It's, nobody, I don't think people wander around thinking, I'm going to make this and I'm going to make it so that everyone hates it and hates me, And so there is that first level of, oh, I should pare back on this. I should make this character nicer. I should make this story nicer. And for me, just learning to sort of acknowledge that voice or that inclination is there, and then to push it aside in favor of finding the truth in the character and the truth in the story, because not all people are nice or likable or friendly or or things like that. And not all stories are nice and polite and anything like that. And I think if you want true characters and true stories, that you have to worry more about getting the essence of the character on the page, whether or not people are going to like them, and whether or not people are going to, you know, find things in that story that they don't like or don't respond to. And that's kind of fine. I don't think that every story is for every reader. I don't think that every character is for every reader. I am quite sure there are people out there who don't like some of the characters that I've written. I try to stay away from people discussing my work because, you know, once I've written it and it's out there, there's not really anything I can do to change it, even if I wanted to. But if they don't like the characters that I write, that's fine. That's totally their right. But I'm not going to change the way I write because of that.
Yeah. Okay. You did a Read for Pixels AMA last month.
Yes.
But you made some very interesting remarks. So you said you don't set out to write stories that speak specifically to violence against women, but many of your stories do depict various forms of VAW, from the subtle to the in your face. Could you tell us why? Why do you put these things in?
I think it goes back to sort of what I was just saying about finding the truth in the story. You know, yes, I write fantasy. You can make up an entire new world, but it's also, most of my fantasy is set in this world, or at least in a version of it. And these are things, violence against women exists in our world. And it's something that women in our world, unfortunately, have to deal with and have to learn to live with. And so when it does seem like something that fits with the story that I'm writing, that I'm going to allow it to be there on the page so that I can show how my characters react to it and live with it and learn to tell their own stories and triumph regardless of what the world is throwing at them.
You also mentioned in your AMA that you are super interested in medieval women writers, which is really cool. And in fact, you did a dissertation on this topic.
Yep.
So culture and society tend to erase the role of women in history and overlook stories of women. Could you tell us how have medieval women writers influenced your work?
Well, I have this. Where's my camera? There we go. I have one of my favorite medieval women writers, Julia of Norwich. I have some of her words actually tattooed. All manner of things shall be well. And it's something that I've been going back to a lot recently. I think that I wrote my dissertation on women like Julian, like Marjorie Kemp, who is a mystic, and Anne Askew, who is a prophetess, and Joan of Arc, who probably is the one that most people in that list that most people have heard of, who saved her country. And they were all sort of unlikely, but not any more unlikely, I think, than women in our time who write or who go into politics or who do, any sort of amazing things. I think especially when you look at history, it's, there's this sort of popular narrative of, oh, it was all a bunch of, guys running around and doing things and women stayed at home and they didn't do things. But I think, once you start to look, you find women everywhere doing things and making things and changing the world. It just depends on how we learn to look at that.
We've got an interesting question from one of our viewers. It's from Misty306. Misty is one of our regular audience members. Hi, Misty. So Misty asks, have you ever been accused of creating a female character who some readers claim was unrealistic, even though such a female exists in our reality?
No one has said that to me directly. Again, it's totally possible that might have happened. But I think that I don't necessarily see any of them as being unrealistic. I think when I write these characters, I mean, okay, yeah, you remove the fantasy element. I don't actually, unfortunately, know any women who can cast magic spells and like cars fly through the street. It would be really cool if I did. But in terms of like, once you remove the fantasy aspect and just when I look at them as people, I try to make sure that they seem like people that you could actually meet, that exist, that could be a part of our world. So hopefully they do seem realistic in that manner.
Yeah. Have you ever been told by I don't know, your publishers or editors that, this character, I don't know, not very likable, or changed the scene, or, and then has that ever happened? It happens to a lot of people.
I've been very lucky with that. My editor at Saga, Joe Monti, has been incredibly supportive of the kinds of stories that I want to write and the kinds of characters that I want to put in them. And so I haven't ever had to have that conversation where, he says, oh, she needs to be more likable, or this thing needs to change, or you need to pull part of the story that's important to you. I've been very fortunate that way. And so it makes me feel like that I can keep doing the thing that I'm doing, that I can keep writing these kinds of stories and these kinds of characters.
Yeah, that's cool. You've got some interesting comments. So here is TVTV. Kat's a great writer and a fantastic educator. Happy to see her. Thanks,
Hello,
Tibu.
thank you for joining.
Okay, so on to my next cluster of questions. Now, we've been talking about women, female characters. Let's talk about men.
No.
No, we should talk about men.
Of course.
They're worth talking about.
Of course.
Okay, so now there are of course men in your books,
yes.
And though there are misogynistic characters, of course, but in general, the male-female relationships between main characters, especially, are generally quite equitable. And some of your male characters are respectful of women, their thoughts, and their decisions. So, speaking about relationships between men and women, the line between consent and coercion isn't always very clear in fantasy books, whether it's epic fantasy, urban, paranormal romance. Do you think it's an issue that writers in the genre have started tackling successfully in recent years?
I think so. I think that, I think it's not an issue just in fantasy. I think it's an issue in a lot of literature and a lot of art, that, the line between what is consent and what is coercion and what is, informed, actual, enthusiastic consent versus that sort of, well, I guess if I don't have any other choice, which isn't really, and so I think a lot of people are realizing that it's important to see that sort of enthusiastic consent on the page, that it's important to write those characters, that it's important to sort of reflect that back into the world as this is what we should have, this is what we are aiming for. And so by writing characters that, that as you mentioned, it was so nice to hear that you think that the relationships are equitable, that the people try to treat each other with respect and as equals. And I think that doing that in any genre does a good job of helping move that genre forward.
Yeah. So do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity, even vulnerability, can be one of the ways that SFF writers can break away from these toxic tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just like it's important to write women as full and rounded and complex characters, it's important to write men as full and rounded and complex characters. And that means to step away from, as you said, the tropes of toxic masculinity, and to show male characters who are capable of love and tenderness and sadness and mourning, and allowing themselves to be anxious or worried, or anything else, where they're not like the strong, Conan type all the time.
Manly man.
Yeah. Manly man, and who, Gaston from Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. Like, Gaston is funny, but we don't need to see him in every single book.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I feel like it's not just me who feels it, but these toxic tropes actually hurt men as well.
Yes,
because they're unable to express themselves.
Right. And it's, everyone should be able to express the full range of their humanity, regardless of man, women, non-binary, anybody. We should work on writing people who are fully human people.
Yeah. So do you think then that eventually this violent alpha male type character will phase out of SFF as cultures worldwide start kicking out the this toxic masculinity trope? Or do you think it's one of the stereotypes that is going to stick around for much longer than expected?
Um, I think that any character type is going to continue to exist, just because they can be interesting to see in fiction. Like, the thing about fiction is a lot of times you can run into characters that you would not want to encounter in your everyday life. And you can write characters that you would not want to see, or model behaviors in your books that you don't want to see in everyday life. And so I think that there's a big difference between, saying that we're not, I think that saying that we're not going to see these characters anymore is going to be pretty unlikely, because I think if you have that sort of alpha male character can be a useful character in moving forward plots and stories. And so I think that people will continue writing them just because it can make good fiction.
Okay, which kind of brings me to my next question.
Mm-hmm.
So, stories are one of the most powerful ways of bringing about cultural change. In your opinion, how can authors strike a balance in their storytelling between raising awareness about violence against women while telling an engaging story without being pedantic or preachy?
Right. Um, I think you just, again, you focus on what your story needs to do and be. And so if you show the characters genuinely going through things, and you show the range of their emotions, you show what they're experiencing, what they're struggling with, what their victories are and what they're celebrating, then you're seeing the story of a real person. You're not seeing, like, now I'm going to tell you the story of the woman who overcomes all obstacles. I mean, yeah, I mean, like, that's it's an easier difference, I think, to see than to sort of explain, but we can recognize that the difference is there. And if you make it the story of a real vibrant individual on the page, then it's going to come across as something that matters rather than something where you're just sort of preaching at people.
Yeah. So, how then do you think that stories that explore this theme, that women can be empowered persons in their own right, that men should respect women, can help to stop violence against women?
I think that we can, like, fiction helps us imagine things. And so if we see fiction that shows us the behaviors that we want to see, if we write the worlds that we want to see, if we write the characters that we want to see, the change that we want to see in this actual world that we live in, I think people will begin to see it. And maybe that helps people consider alternatives and possibilities that they wouldn't have before, or consider that things could happen that they wouldn't have before. And I think that's that's part of the way change can occur.
So, do you think that writing a world where there is no gender divide, so like women and men are completely equal from the get-go, an ideally equal world, would that be as effective in portraying an idea that equality is possible than if you're writing, inequality into your stories?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. And now I'm sort of like, gosh, I wonder if I could write that story where there was flat out equal, no prejudice and no gender and everything else. And now my brain is worrying about that instead of trying to answer your question.
No, but I mean, yeah, I always wonder this as well. I'm sure a lot of people do. If you're reading a world where everything is completely equal, it does make you think, but is it as effective as writing a place where you see all the inequalities that we face and you see them on the page and you see how people deal with them or don't deal with them?
Well, I think one of the things that we are often used to looking for in stories is the idea that something's going to change, that there'll be a problem to be solved or something like that. And so I think as writers, when we're looking for stories, we can look, it's easier to look and say, oh, okay, I'm going to write a story where there is this big inequality. There is this big divide, whether it's, gender or some other kind of inequality that exists, rather than, because that gives you that problem to be solved. It gives you that thing for your characters to do and to wrestle with. And so thinking of a society where there is complete equality if you're going to write a story about it, then you start wondering, well, where would a conflict come from? Where would that need for change be? Could you actually put that sort of thing to work towards in there if you already have it? I mean, obviously people write utopian societies.
Yeah.
But I think it's very hard to sort of depict in a compelling way the idea that there is actual utopia.
Yeah. Okay. I get it. Okay, let me ask a question about the Bechdel test. So your stories definitely pass the Bechdel test. You have a depiction of relationships between women, whether they are great or whether they're toxic. One example is the really complex and interesting relationship between the sisters in Roses and Rod. So why do you think it is important to portray this kind of relationships? And why do you think many SFF authors still have trouble writing stories that pass the Bechdel test, despite the fact that there are many more things that women talk about other than men? And what could you suggest for writers who want to write female conversations and relationships realistically?
Okay, so I think it's important to show a wide range. I'm trying to say variety and range at the same time. It's important to show a wide range of relationships between women, not just positive ones, but also toxic or complicated ones, because again, this is the kind of relationships between women that exist. That you don't, we're not all, sisters and buddies and best friends and, things like that. That doesn't, we are allowed to be complex people, so we are allowed to have complex relationships.
We're not all mean girls who are competing with each other.
Oh my gosh. Again, not that any of these things can't be interesting and fun and part of a good story, but there are other options. And so in encouraging people to think about those other options, what else can you do? I mean, I guess my first thing would be to just sort of sit down and think about who you meet in your life. Actually pay attention to the people that you know, and you will, if you're having problems thinking about what kind of complex relationships women could have, ask yourself if you allow yourself as a person to have complex relationships with women, because maybe that's something that you can actually change. And then I think, and then if people are, it's very, even though I've read books and seen movies and things like that, where there are still, there's only one woman on the superhero team, or, and she's somebody's girlfriend or kind of thing. Like, I think just encouraging people to think bigger than that, to say that there are other, it's not that you can't have that character. It's not that she can't be there. It's not that she can't be someone's girlfriend, but also think about what other kinds of women do you know? Does she have any friends? What do her friends do? And just asking those questions and letting yourself take small steps. Or when you have a background character, think about the genders of your background characters, the people that, answer the phones or walk by on the street. Is there a reason why your crowd is full of guys? If there's not, then think about that and maybe change it. And it might be an effort at first, and that's okay. That's how we become better writers, by looking at where, what might be the weaknesses in our writing and working to make them strengths.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about geek culture. Okay. Geek culture in general, including science fiction and fantasy, has had its share of critics, saying it's still too male-dominated, despite there being a rising number of prominent, well-respected, well-known female authors. Plus, there's still plenty of hostile, misogynist, and sexist behavior by male geeks towards female geeks. What do you think needs to be done to make geek culture as a whole, whether it's comics or gaming or books or cons, more welcoming for women and girls?
Any other major problems you'd like me to solve? Well,
this virus,
because I do think that it is an ongoing problem. I think that we have a really short institutional memory, you know, because there have always been female geeks and women in geekdom and women writers and things like that. I mean, all the way back to the medieval period, Marie de France was writing stories about werewolves, you know, like this is something that's always been there. We have, you know, and women always talk about this and have written about this and write essays about this. And it seems like we have to keep telling the same story and writing the same essay and bringing up the same works to say, no, we were here. We were always here. We will continue to be here. And so I think, like I said, changing that memory, that culture that seems like it's so easy to forget that we've always been here. And I wish that I could think of a really good solution to that situation. And I don't know, maybe I'm not that good of a fantasist. But I think that's a big part of it. It's just the acknowledgement of the fact that we're not new, that this isn't something that we've recently changed, and that we're not going to go away either.
Yeah, one of our the previous author guests that we had on, Stephen Graham Jones, he was saying something like, you know, it's not a pie. Geekdom is not a pie that if you slice it up and and you share it out, you're not going to get a smaller slice. So everybody can share.
Yeah, I mean, like I want to hear stories from everybody, you know, and saying that acknowledging the fact that there are women writers out there doesn't subtract the amount of male writers who are already out there or anything like that. Like saying that, you know, changing how we think about who is here and who to read, and like it's a great analogy. The pie, you just get extra pies. You don't lose the ones that you have already.
Yeah. So we have another question from the audience, from Misty again. A pretty interesting one as well. She asks, with all of the established female authors such as yourself, writers and creators, when will fans and critics stop trying to shuffle all of you into the YA genre? Is this something that happens to you? I think it does, right?
You know, I see it happen to a lot of people, and it does. It's a strange phenomenon because, you know, like I don't understand why it happens. I don't understand why someone says, "Oh, a woman writing fantasy, they must be writing YA," and I'm like, no, everybody's an adult, definitely adults. You know, like this, and so that it. I don't know when people will stop because I don't know why they're doing it in the first place.
Yeah, it's a bit odd.
And it's not, and the thing is, like, I love YA. I can turn around into my bookshelves and I can pick up YA books and I read them and I love them and I love the people who write YA, and it's something that I may do myself in the future, but it's not something that, you know, female writer plus fantasy genre does not automatically equal YA, and so it really is a puzzle why that continues to happen.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this is another big world problem that you can solve, Kat.
Okay, yeah, and after I fix the other ones.
After the geek culture one, after you fix the virus, and then you solve this one.
I think probably by
another question.
Care of.
Another question from Sivu. What are you currently reading, and any recommendations?
I was lucky enough to get an arc of Victoria Schwab's Addie LaRue, and I am reading that right now, and it's amazing, amazing, amazing. What else have I been reading recently? I also am reading, and she's a favorite writer. Some other great writers that I recommend. Amy Rose Capetta's The Lost Coast. Which is YA, and it's about a bunch of witchy teenage girls out in the California coast, and it's astoundingly great. Tasha Suri's Realm of Ash it's just such a rich, gorgeous romance and a beautiful world, and I utterly, utterly loved it. So those are some recent recommendations.
Okay, cool, thanks. We'll try and check them out as well. Okay. So let's see. All right. So another thing for you to solve. One of the reasons violence against women exists is, of course, gender inequality. Do you think there will ever be a time when there will be complete equality between the genders, and so it will follow that there will be no more violence against a person just because she is a woman?
I really hope that there's a day when there's no more violence against a person just because she's a woman. Like that would be
Right.
that would be amazing. I hope that we figure out how to address the relationship between genders that causes violence to be what people think of as a solution to their difficulties and their issues. And I very much hope that that's something that we can look forward to in the future.
Isn't it crazy that, I mean, I find it a bit mind-boggling that there is actually a word for the murder of women, femicide.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just homicide anymore. It's not just the murder of people, but specifically a murder of women just because they're a woman.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, you know, you think about it for too long and it just starts, you know, it breaks you. It breaks the, you know, something deep inside that this is something that we have to change, that we have to figure out.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm gonna ask, it doesn't seem that there are any more questions from the audience, guys, so I'm gonna ask my last question. So you have a few minutes to type in your last questions while I ask mine. Okay, so this is sort of an obvious question, but we ask all our authors this. Now, you have been very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. Why do you support the cause to end violence against women? And what do you think authors can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Well, I mean, like, I support the idea of ending violence against women because I can't imagine not supporting that idea. It's really that simple for me. As to what we can do, I think, you know, we can do things like this to help raise awareness and help advocate, help fundraise for organizations that are working towards that are working towards helping women get out of abusive relationships and find safe places to be and safe new lives to start, and supporting them in that are working to end economic and social inequalities that make women feel like they don't have places to go that are safe, that aren't violent. And, you know, clearly I don't actually have all of the answers, and I can't solve all of the problems. And so I also think it's really important for me to continue to listen and to learn and to, you know, to be aware of organizations that are advocating and that are doing the work, and seeing how I can support those organizations that are already out there, that already exist, and that are already helping.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for your support, Kat. So that was it, everybody. Thank you, everyone who asked amazing questions. And there's been quite a good chat going on in the YouTube chat box. So, and thank you, Kat, for answering all our questions so amazingly. Believe it or not, it's been about 45 minutes that we've been talking.
Yeah, I hadn't realized.
Yeah. So I'm going to put myself back on screen. Hi, everybody. So I promised to tell you about the author goodies we have set up on our Reddit fundraising page, how you can get your hands on them. So as mentioned earlier, Kat has donated some awesome treats to the stash of author goodies. So let me tell you what they are again. Treat number 1, the Kat Howard Starter Book Bundle, which is a signed and personalized hardcover set of 4 of her books for one donor in the US. Oh, here they are again. That's The End of a Sentence, co-authored by Maria Davina Hidley. That's an awesome cover. And then, which is next? A Cathedral of Myth and Bone, and Roses and Rot, and An Unkindness of Magicians. So that's 4 of Kat's amazing books. That's one bundle. Treat number 2 is a Drabble by Kat for one US donor. Kat has offered to write an exclusive 100 word 100-word story for one fabulous donor based on one word of the donor's choice. And Kat will send you a typed hard copy, which will be signed, also a handwritten copy, and email you a soft copy of the story. So there's only one of each of these things available, so you better hurry up and donate. Once someone snaps it up, it's gone. And let me tell you again, we've reached $5,495 so far. So we're trying to reach our stretch goal of $10,000 to make up for last year's funding shortfall. Please do give generously. There are plenty more author goodies available besides all these amazing things that Kat has given, including stuff from Tamara Pierce, Claire Legrand, Anna Stevens, Kandara Blake, Leanna Renee Heiber, Alicia Chamel, PC Cast, so much more. And the new goodies will actually be released every Friday throughout March. So please do give generously. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help in violence against women. So now all these things are up on the Pixel Project's Rally Up fundraising page. Let me share with you a nifty little slide. Let's see if this works. There. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, so there's the link for the Rally Up page, R4P Rally Up IWD 2020. It's case sensitive. Go and check it out. Our chat box moderator should be putting up the link there to make it easier for you to get there. Go check out all our goodies. Please donate. If you want to find out more about Read for Pixels and our upcoming author sessions, go to Read for Pixels and they'll put up that link as well. And of course, if you want to find out more about the Pixel Project in general, how you can help in violence against women, go to our website, www.thepixelproject.net. Okay, so I think that's it. All that remains for us to say is goodbye to everybody. Thank you so much, Kat, for being with us today.
Thank you for
And
inviting me.
thank you for all your questions, everyone. And Kat and I will say goodbye.
Good night.
And stay safe. Stay at home and stay safe.
Yes, stay home. Read books.
Read books. Yeah. Watch Read for Pixels author sessions. Go check out our schedule. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Good night.